Here.
Chow? Here. Lindsay Ryan?
Here.
Partha?
Here.
We will begin with the approval of the meeting agenda.
I move that the Board of Education approve tonight's meeting agenda as presented.
Second.
Mendoza?
Yes.
Halpern?
Yes.
Tanya Budi?
Yes.
Hernandez?
Yes.
Chow?
Yes.
Lindsay Ryan?
Yes.
Kartha? Yes. So before we get into our action and discussion items, I did want to note that per the proclamation by Governor Pritzker, the week of October 20th through 26th, 2019 has been declared Principals Week, and Friday, October 25th, 2019 is Principals Day in Illinois to recognize principals and the Illinois Principals Association for all they do to help our children learn and succeed. I'm pleased to offer a few words of appreciation for our school leaders in recognition of National Principal Week, in recognition of National Principals Week. In our district, we can be proud of our school leaders who go above and beyond to support our students, their families, and the educators they serve. As the chief learners and educators of our buildings, we are grateful for our team of school administrators who are deeply committed to learning and collaboration to increase the success of our Black and Brown students. Nelson Mandela's words come to mind when I think of the challenges they face and are committed to confronting. I never lose, I either win or learn. Thank you to all of our principals and assistant principals and school administrators for your tireless efforts. We see you, school leaders, and truly appreciate all that you do. Please know that we are grateful for your service.
Thank you very much. We will tomorrow. We have a principals meeting. The timing is perfect. We'll be recognizing them there. And then on Wednesday, right, Lee? We have assistant principals meeting, so we'll be thanking them as well. For some of you who are now principal, you know how it can be a lonely place. And we're very pleased that we have such talented principals and assistant principals who are really focusing in on student success, which is very key with that. Andalib, is there anything further that you'd like to add to that?
I just want to echo those comments, and we just want to thank our administrators for all that they're doing. We have a huge agenda as a board and as a district to really champion the success of our students' learning, and we want to continue to collaborate with our teachers and all the staff in the district in achieving those goals. And so I want to just congratulate our principals during National Principals Month.
Thank you. Were there any other comments?
Thank
Do
you.
we have
That's all for tonight.
any board comments?
The reactions to recent events have caused me to reflect on where we are as a community and what it will take to create a truly equitable Evanston. I'm proud of our principals and their staffs that are leading the way on changing the conversation about celebrating Halloween in our schools. For those of you that know me, you know I have loved when my kids will join me in a family costume. And the years we wandered the neighborhoods as the Muppets, Inside Out, Sesame Street, and Sea Creatures brought me delight. The only thing between me and my kids wearing a family costume and trick-or-treating now is my kids' current lack of enthusiasm, not our school district. What our schools are trying to change is the harm caused by the in-school celebration. Too many kids are made to feel that they don't belong, and we should all stand by our educators that are trying to stop that from happening. Having a serious commitment to equity means that those of us that have power and privilege don't get to decide what, how, and when a sacrifice might need to happen. It means that we don't need to have had an experience to accept that it is a negative experience for someone else. And once we know it is a bad experience for someone else, we need to stop justifying why we're okay with that. I encourage all our families to support our schools for taking this step. I'm deeply committed to our district providing a curriculum that prepares our students to thrive as global citizens. And I want to acknowledge that having specific weeks in our curriculum, like Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ+ Equity Week, and what I hope will be weeks focusing on the experience of Latinx folks and Indigenous people in the future, is an important first step and one that should be celebrated. While we celebrate this progress, we must be honest that these weeks are wholly inadequate, and we should not be satisfied until the benefits of these weeks are seen in our schools every day as we work to dismantle the white supremacy, homophobia, and transphobia that permeates our buildings. And I want to highlight some of the benefits of this work. I'm grateful to all the educators that have taken the lead and donated countless hours to advocate for and create the lessons for these weeks to teach our kids about the histories and current realities of groups that are not often valued in our curriculum that is so centered on white, straight, cisgender experience. We would not be here without you. Thank you. These weeks require all of our educators to examine their own bias and knowledge as they strive to be comfortable and prepared to teach about identities that are not their own. Recognizing that teacher training programs have not provided our educators with all the tools they may need to help us raise our kids to be global citizens, our teachers have been working hard to gain the knowledge they need in professional development opportunities. They've engaged in a variety of trainings from Beyond Diversity, SEED, Culture Responsive Pedagogy, learning how to talk to students about the N-word, and understanding gender and gender identity. Educators knowing about and intentionally considering the experiences of their students from marginalized groups pays dividends that extend far beyond the assigned week. In a job that already asks so much, I'm grateful for your commitment to your own lifelong learning. In addition to changing the landscapes for students, it's my hope that this work will also help change the climate for our LGBTQ+ staff and staff members of color as well. We know how essential it is that we continue to diversify our staff to ensure that our students see their identities represented in the adults in their schools. These are vital steps on the journey to a truly culturally responsive curriculum, positive school climates, and equitable experiences in our schools. However, we cannot rest until the professional learning is consistently applied, and we cannot claim victory when our staff members of color and our LGBTQ+ staff members are experiencing discrimination and harassment from their colleagues. Our students are not safe if our staff is not safe. The positive impact for our students and families in these marginalized communities is immeasurable. Every child should see themselves and reflected in what they are learning, and their identities and stories should never be a footnote in their education. The average middle school student of color hears 291 microaggressions in a 90-day period, and the average high school student hears 25 anti-gay slurs a day, and these start being a regular part of their experience in elementary school. These are frequent and harmful reminders that you don't belong, and the consequences are devastating. Binge drinking, eating disorders, cutting, and suicide are all potential consequences, and we need a teacher force and a student body who can identify these harmful moments and be prepared to intervene. It reminds us that while policy is critical, it means little without enforcement and consequences for those in violation. The average amount of time it takes for when a person realizes they are gay until they tell someone is 3.5 years. 3.5 lonely, isolating years where they are trying to navigate the entirety of their identity alone. I assume the amount of years for transgender folks is often even longer. And for many of us, that journey is without role models and inundated with negative messages about who we are. With 99% plus of us being raised by straight parents, we are born into families that have no lived experience to guide us through what that identity means for us. The LGBTQ Equity Week was both the mark of progress and a painful reminder of how far we have to go. Watching people declare themselves not homophobic or transphobic while debating your humanity has been difficult. Nobody should experience having who they are and what your family is deemed as inappropriate for children when children are actually living it every day. I want us to learn from the harm caused to the LGBTQ+ community and make sure that when Black Lives Matter Week comes or other similar weeks that we don't allow people's identities to be up for debate. We must stand firm against opt-outs or other veiled attempts to remove children from lessons that should not be relegated to 1 week but are critical building blocks to survive in a diverse world. Kids are never too young to be taught about identity. We can eliminate those lonely years and the devastating consequences they have on their well-being. How do we know that a child isn't LGBTQ+ truly, and not just trying to survive those 3.5 years until they tell us? Similarly, how can you justify our white children being allowed to remain innocent and unaware of issues of race and racism when their peers of color are never afforded that luxury and have to be taught how to stay alive in a society that thrives on white supremacy and necessitates a slogan to suggest that Black Lives Matter? Nobody is more at risk than those who have multiple marginalized identities that force them to suffer the indignities of racism, xenophobia, religious persecution, etc., than LGBTQ+ students of color. And when I'm speaking about students of color and LGBTQ students, these are not separate groups. It is LGBTQ+ folks of color that are often targeted violently, so teaching them about white supremacy, racism, homophobia, and transphobia are not either-or propositions for them. As they navigate a constant threat, all are fundamental to their survival. 21 transgender women have been murdered in 2019. 19 of those 21 were Black. We must teach our kids about intersectionality, how race, gender, and sexual identity play out differently, how our various identities impact our experience, and how our oppressions are linked. While I acknowledge that there are many ways our experiences are different, I refuse to allow these groups to be pitted against each other or baited into believing that we can pick and choose which oppression we are going to dismantle. I cannot celebrate any liberation as a member of the LGBTQ+ community that does not also ensure the liberation of people of color. So I ask you to imagine for a moment what it would be like if our schools helped all of our children reach their fullest potential. Think about what our world would be like if we taught our children to understand the value of those around them and unjust obstacles some of their peers face based on identity, and those children infiltrate our workplaces and demand their companies create truly diverse, equitable, and inclusive spaces that rely on innovation and positive morale. What if the children we are raising become corporate leaders and political representatives that refuse to target and blame people around identity, but instead create policies that eliminate justice, create opportunity, reflect everyone's experience, and harness the incredible potential of all of us to contribute in positive ways to our community and our world? What if our students become the folks training educators so that we all can get the professional training we need to become the teachers and leaders we've been dreaming about? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have board comments. I also have 3 small children, so I did not have the opportunity to complete them as much as I wanted. Start with Happy Indigenous Peoples Day, Happy Hispanic and Latinx Heritage Month, and happy belated District 65 LGBTQ+ week. It's with simultaneously proud and heavy heart that I address our board and our community. Approximately 3 years ago, we as a district embarked on the task of policymaking through the lens of racial equity in response to data that indicated disparate experiences and outcomes in our district that fell along the lines of race. As we started on this path, there were folks that asked, some in the effort to dilute or deter our efforts, others out of genuine curiosity, folks who inquired about the use of racial equity in responding to other ways of being marginalized. Some folks would say, is everything about race? My answer has and still remains the same. Our country's perpetuation of racism and the engagement in dehumanization by the construct of race is baked into the very fabric of our nation, our institutions, and in many ways is its original sin, allowing for the genocide of almost 60 million indigenous peoples and tens of millions of African peoples as captives were stolen from their families and from their land and tortured for generations. From the atrocities and the creation of race in the late 1600s, the U.S. learned to cook the dehumanization of people into policies and cultural practices. As a result, we see the types of exclusion embedded in immigration policies and LGBTQ+ exclusion policies. If we want to build equity in our country and in our schools and truly have anti-racist schools, we must learn to talk about and resist the expression of this original sin. These policies of exclusion and their harms have not been historically enacted without the help of the U.S. populace. The dominant and privileged have not only allowed dehumanization to occur, but often also participated and propagated lies until they were treated as truth. When we review particularly horrific moments in history, folks often wonder, what would I have done? This is a moment for us to assess what we would have done. We've made progress in District 65 in Evanston, But as Dr. Diamond highlighted at last week's Next Steps presentation about Ibram X. Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, racist progress often follows racial progress. If we don't want that to be the case in Evanston, our entire community will have to link arms and be a force for good. Evanston and Skokie must stand in our values for all of our humanity and not make the harm or threat of harm, emotional or physical, towards our children, families, or staff acceptable. In the past 3 weeks in Evanston, Skokie District 65, we've seen our school leaders stand tall in their values to reduce harm being experienced by marginalized children and families by Halloween celebrations. We've seen those folks stand tall, but also be repeatedly threatened and harassed, all in an attempt to get them to care less. In this moment, we must ask ourselves who we will be. What will you do? I support the bravery and commitment of our school leaders. Thank you. We have also seen the suggestion that the existence of our LGBTQ+ children, families, educators, and staff is somehow threatening or less valuable than the contributions of others, leaving them feeling further harmed at the mere attempt to appropriately work to achieve a semblance of representational equity in our curriculum. Thank you to our educators and everyone who worked to build an amazing and groundbreaking curriculum and bring that opportunity to our schools. We need to ask ourselves in this moment who we will be in order to support our neighbors and friends and make sure that everyone's full humanity is recognized and protected. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you for that, both of you. We will move on to our consent agenda. Candace, you've got the...
I move that the Board of Education accept the recommendations outlined in the attached group motion and approve the personnel appointments, leaves, and separations, September 2019 Board of Education and May 2019 Policy Committee meeting minutes, destruction of September 2017 closed session audio recording, August 2019 list of bills, July 2019 Treasurer's Report and Budget Amendment, gift acceptance to Dewey School, the intergovernmental agreement with the City of Evanston for broadcast services, the District 65 Racial Equity Impact Assessment Tool, and proposed Gender Equity and Press 101 policy updates.
Second.
Mendoza?
Yes.
Hilpern?
Yes.
Tanya Moody?
Yes.
Hernandez?
Yes.
Chow?
Yes.
Lindsay Ryan?
Yes.
Cartha?
Yes. And then I guess we will move on to public comments. Members of the public are welcome and invited to address the Board of Education during open public meetings. Speakers are discouraged from using the public comment period to air concerns about or voice personal attacks against specific district employees, being mindful that the public comment period is not a suitable forum for fact-finding or resolution of disputes. Rather, we strongly encourage members of the public who have concerns about specific district employees to communicate with us following district communication guidelines available in our student handbook. Our first speaker is Johan Wessels.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. This is my first time being at a meeting, and I appreciate the opportunity to do so. I would like to address you tonight as a concerned parent and a child of District 65, and as a taxpayer which is funding this district and our schools. Yes, I am outraged by the district's handling and the implementation of the LGBTQ plus Equity Week curriculum. First, the curriculum content was and is not completely appropriate. On September 24th, the district sent out an email heralding the launching of LGBTQ plus Equity Week with no information regarding or a link to the curriculum. We as parents reached out first to our classroom teacher for more information. We were told that they, as third grade teachers, had not had the time to review the curriculum, and for that reason, she was unable to provide more information. On September 26th, I reached out to the principal, and on September 27th, I was provided the GSEA 65 link and was told that I could review the content of the curriculum. My wife and I reviewed the curriculum and were deeply troubled by its content. And mind you, that was only day 1 and day 2. We did finish the entire week's curriculum, though. Our child does not live in isolation, and she knows that there are people who are different, and we do celebrate that. We as parents believe the topic comparable to sex education should be left to us as parents to teach. We made the decision to have a child, and we also have made the decision to teach her about sexuality and sex when deemed she is ready. We raised this issue with her, and we believe that this was propaganda from the district, was intended to teach for the following week. And this was my 8-year-old's response. She said, "What the heck? Why don't they teach this to high schoolers? I'm only 8. To which we wholeheartedly agreed. And even an 8-year-old saw the error in your ways. You as a board had boasted about how much work and time has been invested in developing a robust, thoughtful, and age-appropriate curriculum, and how proud we are to pioneer for every school district in the nation. You have deceived your parents and us as parents. Your backroom deals were made in the dark with any public input or discourse from the public. The news coverage District 65 has received over this debacle is surely not over. Maybe you wish it would go away. On Friday, October 4th, the school sent out an email to staff stating that curriculum for grade 2 and 3 will be changed. Why did you change it on Friday when you were going to implement it the next day, the next school day, which was Monday? Secondly, District 65 did not provide an opt-out for parents or children who do not agree with this view. You even told our principals that the district hired an attorney to review the curriculum to make sure parents are not allowed to opt out. The board does not allow parents to opt out for sex education, but the board claimed that this was not sex ed. On October 7th, I'll be quick. On October 7th, a 5th grade teacher was explaining to his students that men have penises and testicles and women have vaginas. Tell me, how is that not sex ed? From what has been reported in the news media, even the vice president of the school board has stated not telling people the time of the curriculum is an option for the future. How dare you circumvent the role of me as a parent and any parents of District 65, for that matter? You were elected to this school board, but I have been assigned the responsibility as a parent. And if you have children, so have you. On October 8th, the district sent out an email informing all parents that no school will offer any opt-outs or alternative spaces, safe spaces for Equity Week. I have learned that numerous parents of students who were allowed opt-outs, but they were told not to make it public. I take my hat off to those principals because they served their parents and their students right. Our district has a no bullying policy for our school. But as a school board, I firmly believe that you have bullied us in this. How is it possible? I understand that the impression that we value our differences have marked us to be stronger people. But by cutting us down and by not valuing our religious beliefs or contrary views to your belief is not valuing us at all. Thirdly, District 65 has publicized the LGBTQ week as a week of equity. Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines equity as freedom from bias or favoritism. This week was not filled with equity for those of us who do not hold your position. If this was your position, I may please remind you that this was not equity, but a dictatorship. The last time I checked, we are still in the United States of America with liberty and justice for all. Yes, even for those who do not agree with your viewpoints. Lastly, I believe that you as a board and the Director of Equity, who was out for the week for the rollout of this initiative, should probably resign. You have lost the confidence of numerous parents in this district by your attitude of indifference towards children and family. This is contrary to our mission, to the mission of this school board, which says every child, every day, whatever it takes. In this push for equity, you have ignored many and many more children. You have taken a stance, but please know we have taken one too. And I thought it was very timely and fitting that during the week of equity, that even Ellen DeGeneres made a comment saying, she spoke truth to this and says, we can have our differences and still be kind to one another. And she said, when I say be kind to one another, I don't mean only to the people that think the same way I do. I mean be kind to everyone. And I would believe that is equity. Thank you for your time.
Kelly Froelich.
My name is Kelly Froelich, and I'm an Evanston resident. I'm alarmed by District 65's handling of LGBTQ+ Equity Week. To begin, this program on inclusivity has excluded all parents by denying them time to give feedback. It appears your assumption is that those who support GSEA's ideas will support its methods. Conversely, it's assumed that those who disagree are not worthy of a voice. In reality, one can support Equity Week, but not this curriculum. One can also have legitimate concerns about sexuality being part of required curriculum. Let those groups speak without fear. Whatever the curriculum evolves into, a significant part of this will remain sex education. You can't cut it out. The Greeks had many names for love, such as philia, agape, storge, to describe different relationships. When you say love to a kindergartner, they're thinking about friendship and family love. In order to explain that their love for a sister or a friend does not make them a lesbian, you must go into Eros love. As soon as you use the word heterosexual and homosexual, you're talking about Eros love, sexual relationships, and sexual identity. Recognize that and allow parents to opt out. Clearly, young transgender students are not thinking about sex and passion. I'm aware of that. But remember, the majority of kids aren't thinking about their gender or questioning it either. The GSEA has intentionally created a curriculum that asks kids to challenge their gender, and I don't think all parents have noticed that that's the intent. Would you prompt a content 7-year-old transgender child to think about their sexual desires? Well, then why are you prompting content 7-year-old girls to come home from school and say, maybe I am a boy? I'd like to point out what has happened to teachers and parents who have reservations about your methods of fighting bullying. Ironically, they've been bullied by the school district and other parents. I know teachers who feel their jobs are at risk. Parents are being threatened by other parents and afraid to speak up. They've been told by the school board that they have no choice. Your words come across to the parents this way. We've decided that your children should be challenged to reconsider their gender. We're going to teach them about sexual love, and we're going to do it our way, and you have nothing to say about it. I ask that you make things right by just starting fresh. First, have public forums and seek everyone's opinion, both publicly and anonymously. Second, be transparent and specific about the curriculum. And third, acknowledge that this is sex education. Allow parents to opt out. Thank you.
And our final speaker is Tim Hackett.
Thanks. My name is Tim Hockett, and my wife and I have loved living in Evanston for 15 years or so, and we have 2 kids currently in the District 65 schools. On October 8th, my wife and I sent a letter to each board member about our concerns about the implementation and handling of the LGBTQ+ Equity Week. We followed it up with emails to multiple district administrators as well about what was being taught, and we're still waiting for a reply. We haven't heard one reply. We also had 50 signatures from other concerned parents and Evanston residents, and we would all like to hear a reply to those questions. In the letter, we bring up some strong concerns about how and why this week of curriculum came about. How it went from just a professional summer learning project to a mandated curriculum for all students is alarming. It didn't seem the board even followed their own board policy, 6-40, regarding curricular development. This curriculum is also unlike any other curricular implementation in recent memory that we've seen. Teachers were not even notified of the lessons until until about September 13th, 2 weeks before they had to teach them. And even until the last day, adjustments were still being made. I'm sure the board would agree this is not how things are normally done with curriculum. And I don't think it's fair to the students or the teachers or the parents. We also have serious concerns about how aggressive the board was in trying to keep parents that were looking for answers in the dark. Our experience in the district has been that leaders are usually open to dialogue. Our request to district leadership was met with silence, and it's a far cry from equitable, open conversations that District 65 claims to value. On October 7th, when discussing whether or not parents could get more information regarding the time and place of Equity Week in curriculum, School Board Vice President said, not telling the parents or the people the time of the curriculum is an option. Why would this ever be an acceptable response? The school board is voted by the people to serve the community, and thankfully, we don't live in a fascist society where parents' opinions aren't considered legit unless they line up with the dictatorial political agenda of the day. The district claims that the curriculum was available for all to view and review. We find this was not the case, and not until we asked several times were we given access to the curriculum. And even now, the curriculum has been taken down in the name of revisions, I believe. Overall, we're left with the strong impression that District 65 is trying to suppress and silence any opposing view, which is not what a tolerant district should do, in our opinion. I've expressed only some of the concerns that we have in our letter, and we respectfully request again that the board respond to the questions that we've addressed in those letters and to the points there. Thanks.
Okay, that concludes. Did we want to point this out to discuss? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we, in addition to our monthly FOIA report, which is in the packet, we have an update, a timeline update for our gender equity staff procedures. So, Phil, if you want to give us a...
Thank you. As you know, Board, at the policy committee meeting, there was discussion about approving the policy that was done tonight and that has been approved by the board, but now looking at putting together guidelines for that. One of the inquiries that we had was to have DEC provide us with consultants that they thought would be appropriate for this task, and we were very appreciative of them to give us an updated list of those as well. Some of the qualities that we agreed would be important to have is that each of the trainers has been doing LGBTQ work and training and consultation work for many years, are experienced. Each of these trainers also has significant personal experiences with the trans community, either as a trans community member themselves or people in significant relationships with the trans community. And thirdly, that each of the trainers on this list are connected to Illinois or the state at a local level, which would be important to help us prioritize this as well. In looking at the list, the recommendation that was provided to us was a list of consultants. The first one was phase 1 on strategic planning. In conferring with Nikki Blazer, who is the lawyer who will be working with us along with a consultant, she felt that those two people could oversee the planning and coordination of that as well. The second recommendation that was made was to have someone develop the procedures, which we've talked about previously with that, and Nikki recommended to the administration, which we concur with, would be to use Grisha Magdalano, and she is a trauma-informed educator, policy analyst, and advocate working as Safe Schools Alliance policy and advocacy manager. Grisha believes policies are a primary vehicle for schools, districts, and school systems to communicate their values regarding how all school stakeholders should be treated, including students, families, personnel, and communities. In particular, Grisha supports organizations in ensuring that all policies communicate the value and inclusion based on sexual orientation and gender identity, and helps develop policies and procedures related to non-discrimination, equal employment, supporting transgender and gender-expansive students and teachers, bullying prevention, school discipline, and beyond. Their policy work leaves organizations with effective policy language, procedures for communicating policies to the entire school community, along with how to make complaints and enforce such policies, and systems to regularly review the efficacy of new and revised policies. So the procedure would be that Nikki would work with the consultant that I just described, their biography, to sit down and to have a small committee. That small committee would include teachers and principals who worked last year on developing procedures, as well as a central office administrators, and additionally would have 2 school board members would serve on there. This committee would be an administrative committee, not a board committee, and then we would bring back to the board the recommendation for the procedures. Nikki has recommended that the process would include sitting down with the group I just described, and then to have them to provide what are the concept and some of the principles that should be involved with the procedures to make sure that they are very effective with that. Nikki and Grisha would then work to develop a draft of that and then reconvene the committee to come back so that they would be able to develop a recommendation by the timeline that was set forth for December 2 for that as well. The next step that Nikki would take would be to contact Grisha to see when the availability would be so they can get together to start this process with that as well. The other stage of this, of course, would be the training. And at this time, we're recommending that, of course, take place, but let's get the procedures in place so we see what those are, and then move forward of working with the training. And we've been given a list of consultants who could help with the assisting with the training as well for our staff with that too. So in conclusion, we feel that we are going by the timeline that was provided to the board on developing the procedures, and we have a process that was outlined hopefully this evening clearly to you about that. We would open up any questions that you might have regarding the process, the consultant, and then the timeline with that.
Thank you. And so any board members who are interested in serving on that committee can contact you or Heidi.
That would be great.
To select those individuals. Are there any other questions regarding the timeline?
I just wanted to clarify, because of the expertise needed for these consultants, that it would not be subject to, a public competitive bid process, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes, that's a good clarification question, yes.
Anything else? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that update. And just as a reminder, we will be at our policy meeting on April 20th is when it'll come back to the board for an update on that. Okay. Well, with no other business before the board, I adjourn this meeting at 7:48 p.m. Thank you, everyone.